Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are referencing the Johnson edition, and we turn now to poem 420, You'll Know It As You'll Know 'Tis Noon. Now, it is an amazing thing to consider that Emily is living at the same time as Walt Whitman, as Ralph Waldo Emerson, as Henry David Thoreau, as Alcott. I mean, the list goes on, and those great transcendentalists, we call them today, although Emerson himself didn't really like that idea very much. This may be the most Emersonian of all of Emily's poems. We'll obviously let you debate it. Certainly we're going to see Emily as philosopher. Emily, notice the word no is right there in the opening line. Emily as questioning epistemology. What can one know? And maybe taking that fallibilist position. Our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. I'm hoping that you worked through our set of introductory comments where we did talk about in Room 303, our Big Five. Of course, about any text we study, we always ask 5 questions. What does this text have to say about epistemology? That is to say, what you can know. You can either hold the absolutist position that says, I'm right and you're wrong. There's all kinds of obvious problems with that position. The relativist position says there is no right or wrong, which seems to posit a certain notion of a position, of a right and wrong position. The performative contradiction, of course, dispels the relativist epistemological position, which is why often people will run back to the absolutist position. What else is left? And of course the answer is the fallibilist position. About anything that you think you might know, you would simply say, I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. That willingness to accept the possibility of other data sets to come in to disprove our position doesn't make us an absolutist at all, but rather a fallibilist. And I think Emily's going to play that game here. Of course, the second of our Big Five is that question of ontology, who we are, and it has a lot to do with epistemology. And then, of course, in our Big Five, the study of psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective mind, and of course the question of theodicy. Why must there be pain and suffering? And we just mentioned that in our previous study of 419. We grow accustomed to the dark. And our other assumption is that I'm hopeful you can place this poem within the context of the previous 419 poems, and I'm hopeful you've been doing that study with us. Now, the real question for Emily is, how do we learn or know anything or come to it? And her answer is going to be, of course, experience. And in that regards, this is a very Emersonian poem. Maybe, as we said, the most Emersonian of all of Emily's poetry. Guys, it's not clear how much of Emerson Emily read and knew. It also is not clear if Emily ever met Ralph Waldo Emerson, who had been to Amherst and actually probably was very close within her orbit, but whether she actually met him or not is not clear, or whether she ever listened to him deliver one of his famous orations. She says it this way, though. You'll know it as you know 'tis noon, by glory as you do the sun, by glory as you will in heaven know God the Father and the Son. By intuition, mightiest things assert themselves, and not by terms. I'm midnight, need the midnight say. I'm sunrise, need the majesty. Omnipotence had not a tongue. His lisp is lightning in the sun, his conversation with the sea. How shall you know? Consult your eye. Now, of course, it's stunning to think that Emerson, in his classic essay, Nature, would talk about that transparent eyeball, right? Notice she'll begin with, you'll know it. Not I know it, not we'll know it, but you'll know it. You'll know it as you know 'tis noon. By the way, notice the repetition of the word know in this poem at least 4 times, right? You'll know it as you know 'tis noon. And then by glory gets mentioned twice. By glory as you do the sun. Of course, we'll come back to the sun in a bit, right? Obviously, sun's symbolic as well. By glory as you will in heaven know God the Father and the Son. Now, of course, here we're playing the game that she learned from Hamlet. You'll remember Act 1, Scene 2, I'm too much in the sun, and of course, you'll remember that young Hamlet will be playing games with the words S-U-N, S-O-N, right? In other words, there is a way, an she's going to use the word intuition, a way intuitively that we just seem to know things, and more particularly the glory of things. And of course she mentions it by intuition. Interestingly, she'll use this word intuition very rarely in her poetry. We already saw it in 389, you'll remember. We'll see it again in 679 and 970. By intuition, and the note is capitalized. Mightiest things, so we go from glory to mightiest things, assert themselves. In other words, almost as if it's, what is the language that Jefferson himself will use? We hold these truths to be self-evident, right? By asserting themselves, self-evident, right? And not by terms. In other words, there doesn't have to be a lot of terminology that's used, right? It is immediate, okay? Notice she'll even then play some witty games with us. I'm midnight, you'll remember midnight from poem 419. I'm midnight, need the midnight say, it's self-evident. I'm sunrise, need, notice she doesn't say the sunrise say, but need the majesty. In other words, it's obvious, right? Omnipotence, from God now to God the Father to omnipotence, had not a tongue. We've used this term translinguistic. There are things that language cannot describe, terms cannot describe. His lisp, the way he speaks, is lightning in the sun. We're back, of course, to the sun. And of course, these are phenomena of nature. His conversation, one more reason for us to call these series Chats with Emily, his conversation with the sea. How shall you know? Again, for the fourth time, the word know gets used here. And notice in quotation marks. And then consult your eye, exclamation point. Now, of course, Emily could be speaking of not just the physical eye, but probably referencing the spiritual eye as well, which obviously takes us to our study of Plato, our study of Plotinus, and then obviously our study of Emerson, no doubt. What is the point that she's making here at 2a, the message here? I think that she is arguing that the things that matter, really matter, we often know by intuition, by insight. It is what Joyce will call the epiphany, you'll recall. At 2b, I love her repetition of no. I love the kind of ironic rhetorical questions that she asks in this poem as well. At 3a, consider the fact that out of this, can I call it this New England transcendental brewing that's happening, that Emily clearly was a part of, just as was Emerson and, of course, his pal Thoreau, William James will produce his Varieties of Religious Experience in 1902. And of course, we've commented on this as well, LearnStrong.net. But these Varieties of Religious Experience this text, James is trying to come to terms with much of what it is, that the game that Emily's playing here. We know things often just simply because of a certain kind of intuition, an obviousness of some kind of sight, maybe an internal sight, we might say. Finally, at 3b, what was a time for you that you just knew? And some of you are saying that now, your study of Emily, you just know that what you're reading here is genius. I agree. Thank you.